Try again. Try again. Hey, we're live! We are live, which is great. So let's just hope that today's stream doesn't fail. That was really disappointing yesterday, having done an hour's worth of poetry, even wrote some poetry about the really cool Edward Sanders. Really cool dude. I wish, in fact, I think one of these days, when I've gotten over the hurt and pain of my heart, I'll try again. But for right now, I am so pleased to be able to present this awesome book. Okay, you can't read it because it's backwards on YouTube Live, but it says Poems for Wives and Sphinxes by Donald Scher, Smoke Shop Press. Now, why this is really cool is because Donald Scher, which I Google searched him, I searched all over for him, there is no Donald Scher. There is no Smoke Shop Press, and Poems for Wives and Sphinxes is not an existent book. Except, here's what's really crazy. It has an ISBN number, which I did search, and there is no records of it. And I did search for Don, and Don Scher is the chief and editor of Poetry Magazine. So we may be reading from one of Don Scher's earliest publications before he ever went by Don Scher, when he went by Donald Scher, which is really, really interesting. So we're going to be reading all of this work today. And there are only 100 copies of this in existence, and they're supposed to be signed and numbered by the author, but this is not signed and it is not numbered. But I know it's not a fake; it's real. This is a real thing, right? So we're gonna read it. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. It's dedicated to the pure imaginary Jane at last. I don't know who Jane is, but maybe Don Scher might. Maybe. So we put in a call to Poetry Magazine, spoke with the gal. She was really, really nice. I told her all about the book, that it was published in 1982, that it was done by the Smoke Shop Press in Providence, Rhode Island, which is actually pretty close to where Don Scher is in the world. I think he's in Chicago right now. And yeah, so it's for Jane, whoever that is. Its acknowledgments say, some of these poems have appeared previously in Fresh Tracks, Connecticut River Review, and Broken Streets, to whom the author and publisher offer their thanks. So here we go. It's really good stuff, guys. Tombstone Epigraphs. My hopes are as old and brittle as Grandma's dying bones. My dreams bled away in surprising crimson spatters. Most all my loves surely seized like Pa's heart, and I marvel at those wonders of awful anatomy. Each day is pigmented like my own olive skin, and pure of intention like my wife's albino eyes. Damn, when I go to sleep I feel my jagged pulse, angular like Mama's bare bony feet, and when I rise up mornings I get cut before I even start shaving. It turns out I am most human when I try to forget I am. Cool, huh? It's funny, I can kind of relate to that. I mean, being a bearded guy that I am, I don't shave anymore because I hate getting cut. But, it's funny. I even forget that I have a beard sometimes. It's kind of weird. Let's go on to the next one, huh? This is called Entropics. There is an ocean as wide as the Atlantic, exotic as the Indian, full of doldrums as the dead, unpeaceful as the Pacific, and as frozen, immobile as the seas at the poles are. It surrounds me with continents and fills me with distance from you. I have discovered that there is no edge to fall off of, though that would be relief. I must throw horses overboard, starve, go delirious, and wait for the wind to fill these sails once more. You have created heavens and earths for me, and caused me to inhabit the nights and days. You allowed me betrayal, sin, punishment, then grace, but now the flood. There is a salt sea stagnant, even filling, with still unpardonable waters. At night navigating stars confound the sextant. The moon reflects upon the face of the deep, reminding me that you have caused your own face to remain hidden from me. Wow, how sad is that, right? Does that sound like a breakup poem? It sounds like a breakup poem. Donald, sorry about your breakup, bro. That hurts. Really, really sucks. But let's keep going. This stuff is so good. Okay, this one's called Youth. I am a man who knows what he's got. Limbs that stiffen or swing in an instant. Blood that pulses freely like compressed hot mercury. Eyes that peer out and suck in and shine brightly. Hair dark and curly I can feel on my collar. I walk the world and it is mine. Poor world. And the women, Mr. Carstairs downstairs said. Son, if I were young, I'd be hopping into bed all the time. That's fine, said I, without his twinkle in my eye. And it's true, they're there, and they look, and I look. I can drink and fight and stay out all night if I want to. I got my whole life ahead of me, and that's what I'm afraid of. I am a man who's got the whole future, and I try to catch it as it flies. But when I see old Mr. Carstairs on the stairs, whose hands are creased and crouched, just like worn-out mitts, I left handing out bats in the abandoned garages of childhood. That one's really fun. I like the idea of Donald Scher being a real badass, going around trying to fight and sleep with girls. Not saying that like fighting is badass or sleeping with girls is badass, but in the poet's mind's eye, he's definitely seeing it as badass. It's a lot cooler than like being stuck sitting there growing old like Mr. Carstairs. Let's read the next one. Fortune. 5 o'clock sorrow bursts from my skin in a stubble, which is hidden in the shadows as I walk down a city street. With no noise. I'm sorry what has happened has happened. Your husband was no Lazarus and there's no spit, only loam on his pothole eyes. My feet taste the sweet brown salt, asphalt, as I pass blue reflections that are Greek people eating at Andrea's. There's the corner bookstore hawking shame, and a Baskin Robbins coolie selling frozen tears. At the bus stop, dead relatives are waiting. I can barely make them out. A lady passes me with a run-over dog on a black leash and stares at my belt, but notices nothing. I almost get hit by a parked car, a cougar on a curbside prowl. As I jump, it leaps over my head and lands in a crouch on a lit sign. The old lady who lives downstairs approaches without recognizing me, using a ski pole for a cane, and curses her bones. At the walkery, I order a combination plate, the way I did when we had lunch on Saturday. I pretended. You were still in the ladies' room so that when you got back, bill paid and tip on the table, I was going to crack open my fortune cookie and read it to you. I'm sorry what happened has happened. How crazy. Sometimes poets write at a time when there's a lot of turmoil. And it sometimes makes sense of things. I know that even in my own life, not necessarily from breakups, but just from when I was going through a tough time, that poetry seems to create structure when everything seems so chaotic. I mean, that poem just seems all over the place, but it boils down to quite simply an apology. So let's keep going. The city stirs. It is October, the dying season when leaves rustle in restless mortality. Autumn's formless brooding darkness falls over me as I walk the bridge between burrows. Angry howls of wintering wind and rushed hour traffic speak between the cables in intertwined wailing. My hackles are raising, and it is getting darker quickly. Bleak, mute buildings sway drunkenly in overcoats of gray. Beneath this grate that carries cars home, the river silently shoves along its burden of odor and sewage as lights switch on in 1,000 lonely attempts to dispel the inevitable dusk and more. The city stirs in 8 million contradictions of inhumanity and community. Under the ice of the stars, night blossoms in timeless indifference. Wow, what a great poem! That one's so good. Some of the things that really make this poem as good as it is you have these kinds of turns of phrases that really bring to life the poem. Let's start from the beginning. It is October. We all know October. It's fall. Regardless of where this is in the world, it's freaking fall. The dying season when leaves rustle in restless mortality. That's so palpable. You can feel it. The dying season when leaves rustle in restless mortality. Oh, it's so good. And just beyond just how good it is, you can almost hear rustle in restless mortality. You can hear it. Autumn's formless, brooding darkness falls over me as I walk the bridge between burrows. It's funny how he says the brooding darkness falls. Brooding. It's funny how in autumn not only with like the time change and all that, but like we all know that in autumn the sun is not out as long. It kind of is brooding on darkness sooner. Angry howls of wintering wind and rushed hour traffic speak between the cables. Because he's walking over this bridge, right? You can kind of see down into the road that's passing by. An intertwined wailing. You know? My hackles are rising and it's getting darker quickly. Bleak, mute buildings sway drunkenly in overcoats of gray. Come on, like, that's great. It's autumn, right? And everyone's got overcoats and they're freezing and they're all the same freaking color. Just like the buildings. They're all about the same color. I mean, even modern buildings today have some tints of blue and turquoise and gray and beige and sometimes white, but like they're all the same. Beneath this grate that carries cars home, the river silently shoves along its burden of odor and sewage. Ah, you could just smell it, right? Out of the grate in the ground as he's walking on this bridge, you can just smell odor and sewage going through the river. Lights switch on in 1,000 lonely attempts to dispel the inevitable dusk. Darn. We all go home and flick on the lights as like this, like, what would you call it? Not a revolution, but like an act of protest to the fact that the dark is coming. But it's completely, this is, hello? Oh, hello? Yes, I am.
Oh, hi, Alexander. It is me, Angie, from the Poetry Foundation. We recently spoke.
Yeah, Angie, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm live for YouTube, and everyone's curious if this is actually written by Don Scher.
Great. So I actually
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And this is just more for confidentiality
Sure.
Coaching
Absolutely.
Foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, so I reached out to Don, and he said that it is a very early work of his.
Wow.
But yeah, and he said just please give him my best wishes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So
Well, thank
hoping
you.
that he will back. Yeah, absolutely. And lots of luck with your review and your um, live podcast, which I was looking at the book and I saw what's it called,
The
poetry
the
prose,
poem prose, yeah.
poem prose. Yeah, yeah, it sounds really cool. It sounds like a really cool podcast.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. And if you do get a chance to talk to Don again, send my best.
Yeah, absolutely. I very much will. Well, lots of luck and
Mhm.
enjoy the rest of your live broadcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.
Holy cow! This really is the poetry of Don Cher! Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I'm like freaking out right now. He actually contacted the gal. She contacts me and tells me Don sends his best wishes. This actually is the early work of the chief and editor of Poetry Magazine. I'm like having a gasm right now. Whoo! Whoo, that's good. That's rich, guys. That's so cool. Okay, and I'm like, I'm one of the best poems in this, but there's still more to come. So let's keep reading, right? Oh my gosh, that's so good. I'm like, ah. So the city stirs in 8 million contradictions of inhumanity and community. That was like a perfect moment of community, right? I reach out to a person, he reaches back towards me. And under the ice of stars, night blossoms in timeless indifference. That is so freaking cool. I can't believe that Don Cher actually wrote this. I wish it was actually autographed by him, but it wasn't. That's okay. It's just like the fact that I pick up the phone and it's confirmed this is his. So, a poem for Columbia University in 1974. Riverside. Oh my gosh, I'm like, I need to slow down. Here we go. Riverside Drive is Heraclitian at 8:45 a.m. I have just stepped outside my room and the windows are shimmying like jello. And the windows are shimmying like jello. Come on, man. That's so good. On a rusted autumn morn, as gas fumes arise to appease the gods, cold, ironical spirits, my legs are charred lamb shanks cracked with fortune. This is the beginning of all days, which force the bloody birth of suns. So what if every enlightenment is gray? That's so fun. Traffic mechanical and pedestrian marks the river into which I flow. I take the elevator with the students, all pimples and glasmy shoes. Oh, glasses. My shoes are different. We look up through the ceiling vent till the car bumps down. Doors slide apart, their sesame legs. In a sleepy placenta, I am extruded. The view from the window is not to be remembered, but it is blue. Its painted river is not to be forded, but it but is good to the last drop. We are each loosely aware of bridges that emanate or tunnels above or beneath the waters. Just get us out! Each faces his own Atlantis sinking, disappearing into the myth of time. A millennium will pass. Then they will attempt to tell our story whole, as if we were not individual souls, as if we were poured concrete. And who doesn't identify with buildings? Scylla, this is the error which we believe, that we are who we think we are, and my lord, it is a good error indeed. Pretty fun. Let's go to the next one. The tension between uptown and downtown. I name the pang of birth as the entire expansion of this urban island leaks out. From a few jostling cells into laden bridges and encrusted numbered streets. We grow up in places like this, crushed by the invisible weight of countless pasts, crawling at night into horizontal plains of pain like beds of defeat, until, driving down the sweating city, we reach our single frail houses, exclaiming that there will never be another Lazarus. You know, it's kind of funny that Lazarus is a theme in this book, and it's something that is really interesting. The topic of Lazarus, Lazarus being the one who rose from the dead. Accidental facts. A man turns to the violet, moon like water off a rock, rigid habits of thinking. Blue wool and summer, pursed flowers invite a tragedy produced by the body, turning the tables, the anguish of departure, the rhythm of straight lines. Tell me, oh tell me, this welterweight of despair in the corduroy winter, clearly superior to any comparable winter, I'm envisioning a dark bowl, defined and precise. It is conceived by the staff of the American heritage, choker, Christianity. Maintain the speed, the duration of what hinges on my reply. The recital always ends on a new key. I'm not sure, in danger of losing my soul, wishing you were. The thing that really stands out to me in this poem is the first stanza. A man turns to the violet, moon like water off a rock. The man turns to the violet, moon like water off a rock. Rigid habits of thinking. That's like awesome. That's super cool. I'm just like imagining water like just crashing on rock, and how men for thousands of years, women too, right? Humans for thousands and thousands and thousands of years have looked up at that moon and just thought about it. It's so cool. This is such a cool book of poetry. It's funny how the smallest things can have the biggest impact. And from where we stand, the moon is but a small nugget in the grand scheme of our big life. This is such an awesome poem right here. Poem from the ghost of a 19th century woman. This is freaking awesome. To build a house must be the hardest thing in the world. To anchor the plumb line to the heart of the ground and aim a roof to the top of the sky. The soil is uneven, and it breathes. We move its mountains to plant our eaves. A foundation flattens, the structure grows. For turning back the storm that blows. The windows placed like glasses lens, and hearth to gather loves and friends. Warm kitchen for the daily meals, and bedroom for the rest that heals. A cellar where we keep old junk, and attic for our musty trunk. Shutters, siding, stoop, and bell, all complete our private hell. So funny. Oh man, so I work as a real estate agent in my day-to-day life, and I can tell you that people have a lot of emotions towards their homes. And for some, they can be a hell. It can be a hell that you can't escape. And it's terrifying when that happens to people. I mean, it's so wild how in our basements we just store so much of the past, and in the attics we put so much that we just didn't last. Oh, this next poem is so good. It's for anybody who loves dentistry or hates it. It's called For Toothsome Weisten Ouden. We don't know if there's a heaven or hell, but tooth decay we understand well. It's a matter the average man must comprehend the best he can. Though he's not much on things like gnosis, test him out on halitosis. For religion's quite ancillary to matters that are maxillary. And what's more, what lurks way up there, or what we feel in the dentist's chair? What's more fearsome, to hell going down, or getting ground for a golden crown? Why worry about celestial places when your crags might grow straight with braces? And who could care about man's free will when faced with a costly dental bill? It's so funny. So my wife works in the dental industry, and she just she got a good crack out of that one because dental bills are expensive, way expensive. So this next poem is a little bit of a struggle for me because it's kind of high concept, but I think you might get it. You're a smart person. That's why you watch Poetry Hour. For all brave poets, we remember corpse called Lorca. No one sleeps while they are yet shells like bone, buried in hills of sand and filled with blood. If they sleep, may murderous lizards creep through the skeletal tents of their rib cages, licking the bare, nourishing bones as they slither along. If they sleep, wake them. Wake them up, Lorca. Don't let them make love. If they make love, send the civil guard through their spasms with nightmare caps of black. If they sleep or make love, send starfish stretching, reaching, and yellow to all the beaches and beds where they squirm, and hack open these starfish to show their harrowing, marrowing pieces. Crawl away. What does this have to do with the bone-chucked ashes called Lorca? If no one can answer, may they bear children to fight wars and face firing squads. If they sleep and make love, wake them. Wake them up. Bullet-riddled, death-filled, shaking, dark ghost called Lorca. I don't know who Lorca is, but that's a pretty moving poem. I do plan to have kids one day, and the idea of having them stand before a firing squad and get blasted. Wow. I guess I've never really thought of that. That my sons and daughters could go to war and be shot to pieces. Kind of makes me sick to my stomach. Dang. That kind of got me. But there's more, so let's keep going. From Emily on Tuesday. 1. The years have been strung between us, and I see them now. Unused telephone lines swaying in spring storms, icing up on blue winter afternoons. A connection might have been initiated, but for lack of the tiniest electric impulses. Yet we kept ourselves untethered, apart in the expansive long distance. I had thought we were severed, but we were linked the whole time. I thought of you relentlessly. 2. Your suicide attempt put me in my place, which is a cave whose cold is bitter and numb. Your flesh in relief on those sheets, the pale hands clenched as if around a small bottle. Is this why your speech was so inoperative? Because words all exploded like crystal hurled against a wall? The lips now move, The eyes are dilating. There is an acrid residue of what could not be pumped out of you. I am afraid that when you speak again, you will say my name. 3. We will try not to die. It is what we have always done. And when we finally meet again, as healed as a cloudless sky, we will say nothing after all. For sometimes an absence itself may be as potent as any absinthe. Gosh. You know, the Poem Pros has a funny job. We go to these events and people tell us stories, and we try and craft them into poetry as quick as we can. And I'll never forget the one when we first started the Poem Pros, where a girl came up to me and she told me about her brother who committed suicide. And she didn't want a poem or anything like that. She just wanted these words. And so I typed them. Said, Lance, wherever you are, your heart is safe with me. And as somebody who, me personally, I've been impacted by suicide, not of my immediate family, but I've seen what it does. I've seen how it, like a cold, dead hand, it reaches into people's hearts and steals all the warmth, but leaves it beating, until it shatters. Yeah, suicide sucks. And so even if there really wasn't a suicide or an attempt, just the topic always gets to me because I know how bad it hurts people before, after, during, and forever then. But there's still more good poetry. So let's not lose heart. There's still good poetry. There's still hope for good poetry. Her hair was altogether finer. She had shoes like great prehistoric fish with large gills. And I told her so right off. Her ankles, I continued, reminded me of thick redwood stumps, sturdy trunks that usually led to something taller and well built. Those knees, I went on carefully, were twin astrodomes, and her torso was right out of Henry Moore, and her face. But her hair was altogether finer. It flowed miraculously like neat, tiny rivulets of Louisiana molasses and shined like a sunny breeze on a cloudless June afternoon. It was as quenching a sight as beer on a hot Saturday of mowing the lawn. It waved gently like an American flag and made me proud to live in this land. When she let my hands caress it, I felt like I had just been to the World Series or became the first man to land on the moon. Just one glimpse of her hair made me feel like I had come over on the Mayflower. Actually, she didn't give me a chance to get past the part about the fish. In a flash, she had gone faster than the 4th of July. So good. The thing that's really fun about good poets is they know the concept of the turn. Poor poets or novice poets, they don't understand the turn. The turn is a moment when they take their line of thought and they either dial in deeper, like you see here, and her face, and there's an ellipses, but her hair, right? So he turns it and goes past her face, which the face is such a funny poetic symbol. We all have one, but to describe one's face is always lacking. It's always lacking. You can talk about their deep, penetrating eyes, but you could be talking about James Bond. You could say how lovely their ears are, but you could be talking about the Buddha. You could say how sightly are their lips, and you might be misconstrued altogether. You know what I'm saying? Like the face, it kind of lacks. in how definitive it is. It's almost too specific to actually touch upon. And so he turns the poem up to the hair and really dives into it and gets into these really cool thoughts, like going to the World Series. Like, oh, that's so cool. So much anticipation behind that. Or like being the man who landed on the moon. You know, you're touching on virgin soil here, right? Like this is this woman's hair, you know? But then he goes one step farther and turns the poem again. And this is what the mark of a really great poet is, somebody who has the capacity to turn you again in a loop, like a coda, bring you right back to the top. And actually, she didn't give me a chance to get past the part about the fish. Like, how many times have you tried to hit on a gal or a guy and you just said the wrong thing from the get-go? I mean, it's not uncommon. And in a flash, gone like the 4th of July. So good. Way to go, Don. Great poem. Deus ex machina, which means God out of the machine, right? Do we take responsibility for that which we have not caused? The names of the dead press my eyelids as I dare sleep. How can I possibly rise when countless ghosts weigh so heavily upon my struggling chest? They have interfered with my ability to love and remind me that too many important things need to be done. Finally awake, I wind my way through shelf-sagging tragedies, the frightening nightly news and the bums on my doorstep. In final despair, I resort to palmistry and phrenology in the hopes of reading the human heart as I would a poem or newspaper, though murder stills more than the hands and head. Do we take responsibility for that which we have not caused? The discord is louder than the music of the spheres. I have studied psychology and physics and read about neurons and the innocent blood, but they remain inexplicable and gloomy. And I am nothing now but a moral dilettante, alone under God's sky as his time burns on. Wow. You know, I just imagine, right? Like, I don't know where this was. I mean, ultimately it was published in Providence, Rhode Island. But I'm just imagining, like, myself in my college days where, I studied English education up at Utah State University. And I read a lot of different authors, some that I'd never even heard of, and some I've never reapproached. And some of them radically changed my life. They put thoughts in my head that would just keep me up. And I can totally relate, right? The names of the dead press my eyelids as I dare sleep. How can I possibly rise when countless ghosts weigh so heavily upon my struggling chest? It's so funny that I get to bring in topics of my own personal life into this poetry, which I think is the mark of good critique. A fine critique involves personal experience into the poetry. I think it's too easy to become displaced from poetry. It is an experience where we ourselves have to consume it, and so we ourselves, our context, has to be involved in it. And so just on Sunday, in fact, my nephew turned 10. His birthday, 4/20 of all days. At dinner, he reflected, seemed lost in a thought like I'd never seen before. Lost, looking over pie. He was looking at chocolate cream banana pie and lost in thought. Are you going to eat it? We asked. Yeah, I will. Lost. He was thinking about the earthquakes that were rippling through our valley and how he was lost in that basement when the first one struck, and how tonight he would have to try again to go to sleep. I mean, that's the kind of that's what I experience when I'm reading this, right? A good poet will bring you to poetry where you'll speak and think and imagine in poetry. Novice poets or even amateur poets or overrated poets will they don't do anything. It doesn't spark the genius in you. And that's what I like about this stuff. I was really impressed by what I read this morning. And that's why I'm really glad I found out that Don Scher, I'm holding your very rare poetry. Okay, Doggerel. Doggerel. Here we go. When God set up in heaven, he felt too much alone. So he asked the angel, Kevin, to make a man from bone. He hurled a bolt of lightning and spit out bits of moon. It really was quite frightening, but was done by Saturday noon. This time I take my rest, he said, and sat down on a star. I haven't done my best, he said. It isn't up to par. But I can't do it all again. I'll make another creature. He was just a tiny bit surprised when it turned out to be a preacher. Dear God, said he, please help us in. Whatever we choose to do, if you save us all from sin, we'll always worship you. Good deal, said God from up above. I think that's what I'll do. So now we all direct our love to this being from the blue. I don't really know his religious affiliation, and to be quite honest, I'm not going to speculate as to what it is. But it is not uncommon for poets to examine their relationship with God. It's regardless of whether they believe in him or not. But I think this is kind of funny, right? I think in some ways this is a parody. You know, God is in heaven and he talks to Kevin. Who's Kevin? He was an angel. All right, makes sense. And he goes and makes man. And he's like, I could do better, you know? And he makes a preacher. And the preacher is this figure who's just like, if you just like help us be who we are, we'll always worship you. God's like, dude, that's cool. Let's do that. And now we just love God, right? Because the preacher teaches man to love God and God saves us from sin. Kind of interesting. So I think there's some parody there, but not too sarcastic, not too insulting or insinuating. But anyway, let's go to the next one. Day of Atonement. Day of Atonement. There can be no rage against the expanding face of the universe. Should we rise up against murder, insanity? We can only rise so far, perhaps 6 feet. All wisdom is sad and hellish. All I can do is put my hand over my mouth in faith, like the unrestored Job. There can be no rage. All I can do in faith is put my hand over my mouth. You know, I'm actually going to disagree with him here, but I do understand the topic of the poem. That in the face of this universe and all of its amoral qualities, what are we to do? Speak no evil, right? And just let it go. Let it do its thing. Let it ride on, because at some point it's going to end. You know what I mean? But I think that poetry is an act of atonement. Oh. Uh-oh. Still good. My computer was dying, so I saved it. I mean, do you think that's what God would do too? Thing that man, his creation was dying, wouldn't he just try and save it? Oh, it's running out of power. Just plug it back in. Almost done here. We got a few more poems, and I'm really glad that we get to finish this. Everybody looks in the mirror. This depression comes from crazy Cossacks. Weeping, drinking, sages swallowed up by time, the sky. In the gaping mouths of their sons, They're sons. They weren't born, but heaven sent. All kinds of pain, agony, and sadness called them to New York. I'd love to tell the story of how they fell in love in Brooklyn. I kept calling them randomly and dial out into the universe. But I am sitting at a desk, and it is quiet. Where does the quiet come from when people are talking all over the world and always have been? How dare the occasional sparrow interrupt with his primitive call when I'm trying to hear the voices of grandfathers? Often I hear buses spattering by and garbage trucks squealing brakes. This is the stuff time and buildings are made of. Soft voices, each with words and individual tones, issue forth in despair, disappear forever. Pints of blood dry up in a few years, malleable tissues and colors of the eyes. These things, transitory as bird tracks in the snow, are the things that create all history, and we never know them. I'm waiting for my hair to turn, skin to harden, teeth fall, loosened like leaves, lips crack and parch. Sons born to me will sit in the loneliest winter rains and grieve for the life that spatters round them, dampens the dark soil, and feeds the clumped roots of growing pines. Wow, like he just has this way with like creating a scene for you. And like also taking the cerebral aspect of mortality and like inserting it into these scenes is really good at it. Biography. I am a chronicle of memory whose inductive flow metabolizes energy and information and materials, feeding convolutions in whose synaptic gaps serene biochemical judgments occur, rendering a final manipulated form to that which has been input. I live in the excited states of America, between 50 sets of sublime imaginary dotted lines which govern taxes and license plates, though not rivers, accents, love, or intellect. Dude, nice. And then the final poem. So, here we go. You like this so far? If you have, leave a comment. I've really liked it. I've really liked this. This is probably one of the best episodes we've done yet. And it's only the 8th one. We've got so many more to do. Wife and Sphinx. Caveat. The relationship of picture to reality. A depiction is more substantial, since it persists while reality shifts underfoot, like a lost step in the Everglade, quicksand. Reality has no reality. But we mustn't call it inferior, elevating the arts above life, since a depiction is merely one of many perishable objects under the sun. 1. The Sphinx is in the British Museum, where once, under the unblinking hot eye of Ra, it is now beneath an incandescent lamp, in advance of civilization. Her bed was the sand, her needs few, and her gaze stayed. In all the austerity of the desert, she still reigned luxuriously. With the opulence of eternity and philosophical patience, her possessions were bountiful, so long as she had no need to call upon them. In her treasury, but one pearl, the riddle that expects no answer. She knows the meaning of meaningless. Oh, excuse me. She knows the meaning of meaninglessness. 2. And so It perhaps does not surprise the Sphinx to find herself mounted in a London Egyptian room, surrounded by wealthy tourists who snap instant photos, needing not her gaze, but her image. Where once around her life went on back-breakingly, as usual, in the lugging of stones heavy with the weight of eternal life, and the plowing of fertile, flooded fields. Now it's all curiosity and leisure. Nothing before in history has there been time to stare and enjoy. And with every spasm of the shutter, each takes a bit of her home, till the riddle has finally propagated itself against the stony face of the whole earth. 3. Back home in my study, the framed photo reflects my own gazing. The picture is washed out, overexposed, even though I used fast film, and in it, sharing the incandescent halo, is my wife, with her own frankly carnal grin, clutching the Sphinx. 3 mysteries for which there are no keys. I don't have much to say about that one. Other than, well, poetry is an act of art, and it seems to capture reality. These poems came from a part of Don's life that is no longer reality. What do you have in your life that you use to remember the past? Last poem, last page. Coda for Richie. This poem is grief, the corpse unburied, dancing to unearthly harmonies, sung in voices we cannot hear, except as mourning. Come back, oh please come back to me, as if love or prayer could transpose the unwritten score into flesh and blood again. Only our ears to hear with, and who can hear? But let's not bore the dead with abstractions or metaphor. Only the graceless miracle of metonymy. Metonymy. We should look that up. Only the graceless miracle of metonymy calls to them, not waking them while coloring dreams for their silent slumber. Poems for Wives and Sphinxes by Donald Scher. 2 thumbs up. Awesome book of poetry. Some were a bit highbrow. Most of it really resonated with me cognitively. Gotta block out the light. Block out the light. Yeah. Pretty cool to be reading the chief and editor of Poetry Magazine's early work. Pretty cool. I don't really know what to think of that. It'd be like, what is it? In fact, it's in here. He says, oh my gosh. It's on this side of the page. Oh, yeah. Apart in expensive, expansive long distance. I had thought we were severed, but we were linked the whole time. How cool it was to know that I was able to make contact with the poet. And maybe, just maybe, he watched me read his poetry. And hopefully, I did a pretty darn good job. So again, I want to say thank you very much for joining me for another poetry hour. This has been a lot of fun to keep doing this. I've been questioning since yesterday whether to keep doing this or not, ever since that our recording failed. That really hurt my feelings. But today's was really just made up for all of that and reaffirmed what I'm trying to do, which is to get the good stuff out there, to get heartfelt words out into the world. And you can feel them in these, albeit they might be from a younger poet, but they're in there. So again, thank you very much for joining me. If there's a poet or a work of poetry you want me to examine, please feel free to comment below and let me know. Thanks. Ciao.